Hello and welcome to the Queer Monkey Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach. And of course, on behalf of our Board of Directors, advisors, volunteers, and supporting members, we want to thank you for joining us today. The Queer Monkey Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And as an educational institution, we take an open approach and we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration, and that's why we call it Conversation for Exploration. On these weekly Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics from neuroscience and anthropology and art history, archaeology, mythology, archaeoastronomy, and it goes on and on and on. You're welcome to visit our website at queermonkeyinstitute.com. All of our presentations are free, and as a nonprofit, we invite you to become a supporting member, and we want to thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Queer Monkey Institute. Today, we want to go deep into the power of intention. But first, what do we mean by intention? Intention's more than making goals and positive thinking. It goes beyond the intellect. A goal is more mind-oriented, whereas the true power of intention, it engages the heart. Intentions are powerful. And how can we tap into the true power of intention? We need a discipline, a means, a practice, something that opens us up to that universal source of intelligence. And let me go further. Can we affect the world around us by aligning ourselves together with a collective intention? We see a connection to the ongoing research of the Queer Monkey Institute with ritual as a means of focused intention. And we see convincing evidence in thousands of experiences of participants that we shared this work with. That's why we're really excited to welcome today's guest, who's practiced intention in personal and group settings for decades. But before I do that, let me share a couple quotes. First, Wayne Dyer, which we had the pleasure of interviewing many times in the past. He said, "By banishing doubt and trusting your intuitive feelings, you clear a space for the power of intention to flow through." And then there's the quote from Carlos Castaneda, who said, "In the universe, there is immeasurable, indescribable force which shamans call intent. And absolutely everything that exists in the entire cosmos is attached to intent by a connecting link." And back to Wayne Dyer again, he simply said, "Our intention creates our reality."
Well, we see the power of intention, I think, in just about everything that we do. We focus our thoughts, our goals, our agency and action. We beam our intention and things stir up. If we are aligned, as you mentioned, with higher purpose, it seems that invisible doors open, the waters part, the cosmic gears turn, sweeps us into the right lane at the right time with synchronicities. We're in the groove. And I think that's what a lot of the power of intention dialogue is about. With Dean Radin from the Noetic Institute, we learned that the thousands of trials that they ran with random number generators, we learned that the thoughts of those subjects could influence the outcome, he reported, in a small but statistically significant, measurable way. That focusing our thoughts, aiming them like a beam with intention, can influence other things like machines. And I remember talking about living things in intention. Prayer, you'd have to call prayer a form of intention. I remember talking with a priest who engaged his congregation in a casual experiment with plants, putting two seedlings, receiving the same soil, sun, water. One prayed for, one not, and guess which one sprouted first and grew taller?
Yeah.
We hear about the power of intention from many angles, and even mythology. The heroes and the heroines gifted with superpowers, their journeys in my mind, their meetings with fairy godmothers who gift them with grace, with wisdom, with amplifiers of their intention to win the day, become most pronounced when the clock is ticking, when the need is the greatest, when emotions run high. When we are afforded that extra oomph I think we are engaging the fuller sphere of influence that we always seem to have access to. So I think emotionality and need and compassion is an amplifier. Today we're going to drill down into some real life, and this is theory applied, intention experiments with our guest. We have Tony Hull, of course, to thank for introducing us to Bianca Harle. A few years ago we met her. And then last year, when the rains in the Southwest, they became non-soons, not monsoons.
Yeah.
And Paul and I and so many of us around the area were seeing trees dying. It was tragic. Wildlife suffering. We saw rabbits coming up to the hose where we were trying to water a tree and drink from the hose. I mean, it was suffering. I was lamenting to Tony about this, and he said, talk to Bianca. She has been conducting experiments with some results calling in the rains. And so we had been experimenting in our own ecstatic trance states, calling in rains. But when it got really dire, when we were seeing clouds overhead and not a drop on the ground, we engaged our community and we said, let's visualize, call for the rain, divination, let's call for it. And we walk outside and then it's pouring.
Yeah,
I
that's
am not
crazy.
going to claim cause and effect, direct cause and effect here. All I can say is that when in dire need, what else can we do but turn to the powers that be in the cosmos and make an appeal? And when you get results, you do feel blessed. What else can you do? And then in further conversations with Bianca, she was telling us about her group experiments in applying intention to prescribed situations and the results that she got following Lynn McTaggart's Power of 8 protocols. And indeed, groups tend to add power. We see this in our own group work. And in hearing from Dean Radden and Brenda Dunn, Brenda joining that from Princeton's Pear Lab, both telling us in these Sunday talks that in historical moments, when the world's attention happens to be focused on one thing, a world event, or in sports arenas when you have these huge crowds focused on one event, a game, they see added effect. They see heightened, measurable effects. So power in groups. So we want to hear today how Bianca and her group, she's bringing a couple of members, Tom and Mary, how they were using focused, premeditated intention in prescribed ways in personal and group settings for a couple of years. These are not scientific experiments. These are conducted in the lab of real life. And our discussion will focus on the insights they gained. The insights, their own thoughts, the observations, what they did, what happened. I hope that science learns in the future, in the present, to pay more attention to firsthand, real-life anecdotal accounts. Because I believe that we are all anthropologists in the field, call it our lives, and in the field, call it the universe. And I think that firsthand accounts count for something. In addition to the scientific experiments that Dean and Brenda and others have conducted, but
Right.
here we are all scientists trying to figure out what is the nature of reality. And so I am so glad to welcome Bianca Harle today and Tom and Mary. Bianca, let's hear your story. You're trained as an architect, you're an interior designer, you're a beautiful artist. We're going to see some of your art today. And you are really looking at intention in these deep, deep ways with a group. So start with
Yes.
your story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Welcome.
for that warm and deep introduction. And thank you, Tony, for suggesting that we even talk about this subject and bring this to the table. I'm immensely honored to be here in the company of such extraordinary people that you bring on every weekend. And thank you so much for that platform and the broadness with which you come to this, because every Sunday when I do get to plug in, I am always expanded. And to me, that is the purpose of being here, our continuous expansion. So thank you very much. Before I start, I want to make just a couple of acknowledgements. 2 minutes ago, I think a large circle closed that was held for 10 minutes this morning. Lynn McTaggart is doing joint intentions with thousands of people, possibly tens of thousands of people. at 10 o'clock Mountain Time every morning for 10 minutes, calling for peace. We're
I'm
just
joining that. I'm joining that.
um,
Yeah.
absolutely just calling for peace and the stop of bloodshed. I mean, it is very difficult. I have family very, very close. I realized that my niece is as far from the Ukrainian border as I am from you in Sedona. That is very close, right? So just as we're talking about intention, there are huge movements going on in mass intentions this right now. So another thing I want to acknowledge briefly is that the understanding that we all co-create and that all things are connected are so mainstream and fundamental at this point that we just consider it the base premise, right? So we also realize that everyone is intending all the time, right? You were saying, Laura Lee, perhaps just with different levels of awareness. And this is a deeply personal subject. It touches really the very fabric of who we are as individuals and our personal beliefs. So I just want to say, us who will speak today, we honor everyone in their unique expression of spirit and the divine. And we really simply hope to share, maybe inspire, and maybe give some food for thought.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to just preface that with. And then with that, I'll start my journey. Thank you so much for inviting me to look at my art and to look at my life through this talk. So I'm so honored. So let's start at the beginning. Here is my beginning, my humble beginning. Let me actually just slide something into place here. This is my humble beginning coming into the earth. I was actually born in a small rural village in Germany. And I came into a tribe of builders and agricultural folks. And very early on, spent a lot of time with the earth. It took me a long time to realize just how deeply to appreciate that that's part of my roots. I was really in cycles of planting and harvesting, growing amazing gardens. And I realized much later that that has become a part of my grounding as I am kind of out there once in a while. So I also, though, seem to have come with a foot in two worlds, or an eye in two worlds, as this figure suggests. When I was a child, I often fell into spontaneous trance states. And Paul, you'll appreciate this. They were always brought on by little sounds. It was a much quieter time back then. I might just sit in a quiet room and a clock ticking would take me into a trance state, or bees buzzing, right? Just sitting in the sun and the bees buzzing around. So I just thought this was normal. I actually think it's quite normal for a lot of people. Dr. Goodman said that small physiological shifts can cause these states. And that was my experience.
Speaking of Goodman, this artifact is one of her favorite and really a talisman of this institute because it represents, as she said so cogently, seeing in both worlds simultaneously.
Seeing in both worlds, correct, yeah. So I was also an artist when I was a child. And then when it came time to choose a profession, I wanted to study art. Now, with my very practical tribe that didn't go over so well, and for a couple other reasons that didn't materialize. So I said, well, let me take a gap year and just go out and go on walkabout. And I did what I much later realized was my first true intention. I made a painting or a drawing about this large, and I said, I am going to America. I just wrote this down, and I started drawing all these illusions that I had about going, and for a year focused on that, earned some money, got a ticket, and went off on my walkabout. And at this point, it materialized, and I ended up, let me actually do it here for a moment. The first one is a little tricky. And I ended up in the southwest of the United States in this walkabout. So this was a very big shift. It was a shift in color, as you just saw, right? I mean, the Southwest is a lot of reds and blues. And to me, that also constituted a physiological shift. And I promptly had more altered states experiences, and they got a little deeper, a little more intense. And I want to talk about one specifically that sparked this painting, which I call The Gift, because that actually became a fundamental way in which I experience the world to this day. And the story is like this. We went out into this place in the west of Las Vegas and went out into the desert one evening just because we had nothing else to do. And it was one of those beautiful 98 degrees out at 10 o'clock at night, and very, very calm, except for the crickets were chirping very loud. So I was sitting on a rock and suddenly fell into a deep, not exactly trance, but I all of a sudden saw the entire world around me, myself included, in its vibratory state. Everything was moving and everything was vibrating, much like that little sketch on the bottom. I think Tony actually asked me once whether I could explain this in, whether I had done a drawing of it or a painting, and I'm not able to experience it because it was so interdimensional. I might give it another shot as I go back into my studio now. But it was a very important experience because it constituted a vibrational shift in me. And to me, we're all kind of like dialing into radio stations at different times, right? So that sort of, I was then listening to a different station from that experience. And to this day, I will feel vibrationally where I'm going, right? So I'm literally from this experience feeling my way through my life. After a time, I went to New Mexico and I made the sensible choice of studying architecture. And I became a licensed interior designer and have made my living in that field for the last nearly 40 years. It has been a great career for me for one very important reason, that it has allowed me to work sometimes by projects and given me time in between to really focus on my parallel journey, which was the study of life. So as soon as I got done with my studies and got my career set, I started a long inward journey. The next 10, 15 years, I basically just began studying. And this painting came out about that time, and it's called Room by Room, the painting in the center. And it was really that inward journey that I experienced on the outside, but actually really processed deeply and deeper in. That was the time when I began my yoga practice. I did meditation. I started meditation practice. I went back into my art studio. I created Studio 9 of 1, the name of which is also part of my story, but we'll cover that another time.
I like the painting of the temples. It reminds me of the way that we go through various layers in an interior way, and how so many
really
temples
was,
are
I was really in
way.
sort of a peeling process, either a peeling away and a layering on at the same time.
There's some doorways in Chaco Canyon like this, where you walk from
Yeah,
door
this
to
was
door.
actually, I think, from Salinas Monument here in New Mexico.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I also began reading a lot, and my primary influences at that time were Carolyn Mays. I had a car accident, and my yoga teacher said, "Oh, at that point, I started yoga practice to help with a back injury." And she said, "You really need to listen, look at Carolyn Mays." And that was actually the beginning of my journey into all of the books at the time. I mean, there's so much out there. One of the, illusions, right? When illusions came out, I said, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about," from those vibrations. I also, what was probably most frequency specific with me, what I resonated with the most were the channel materials. My personal, there was Edgar Casey was out there, Ramtha Bashar, and Seth, my absolute favorite. So those were all became part of my influence. And of course, the biggest teacher of all was nature. A friend of mine during this
That I
time
agree
said,
with.
well, what would you want from this lifetime? And I thought about it very briefly and said, I want to live like Robinson Crusoe. I want to live on a tropical island. And somehow that materialized. That was right, another intention. And I had absolutely no way of knowing how that would come together, but it did in an amazing way. And then I spent 5 years satelliting down to Belize and lived on a remote part of an island, building a small beach house and literally living with the land. And to me, the teachings from that are invaluable. So, again, I was reminded of my root. I love being with nature. And there's so much that we learn from that. So toward the end of this period, I began to question again, what is this about? Why am I here? And I did some sketches, and these are the ones that came up. These are very personal. This is what I want from this lifetime. They absolutely have to do with spirit. I think the drawing on the right of the screen um, is how I see us when we're in this reality, naked and blindfolded. Right? So my drawings are always
But in
naked
an
and
upward
blind.
motion. Yeah.
Well,
It
it's
looks like
interesting.
art was a way for you to focus your intention. Were you using
Absolutely,
it that way consciously?
absolutely. And even more so, yeah, as I went on. I mean, at about this time, this was really to say, how do we dance? How do I really dance with the divine, right? Do I lead? When do I lead? When do I let spirit lead? And that flow, I mean, I often said, I had these different experiences and they were like cracks in my perception of my reality. And the flow from these never ceases to amaze me, right? This is where some of the great science comes from, right? When we tap into that flow. And that was my way of expressing that I want to tap into that flow while I'm here in the physical world.
It's where the action is. Yeah.
Yes. And then came a period of about 10 years where I started all this stuff that I had read and studied. I sort of call this the getting on the horse period. I put it all together and I really, really started honing and cultivating um, different inner senses to actually use this more directly. Part of that was to develop, I went into deeper meditations. I meditated a lot. And I don't know if there are any yogis in the house, but the system of yoga has 8 limbs. Most of us think of the asana and the posture practice, but there are really 8 limbs of it. And I really started focusing. At this point, I was also studying teacher training. I became a yoga teacher and studied the upper limbs, the 6th and 7th limbs, which has to do with focusing the mind on a single object. And that is when I really started seeing how I can actually focus my mind on something. And I started training. I literally started doing this every day. How that then opened my heart and how I could listen, not just with my ear, but with every cell in my body based on a vibration. And during this time, the idea that we can actually make things happen in the world started to really come into focus for me. During this time, there were some other influences. At this time, I was working in one of the world's foremost scientific laboratories. So I had a lot of influence with science, just a lot of cross. I myself wasn't a scientist, obviously, but I worked with people and really started to deeply appreciate science and scientists. During this time, there was PBS had also a special called The Elegant Universe with Brian Greene. Absolutely loved that. I said, okay,
Yeah.
here is this fluctuating field of probabilities. And how do we decide what happens, right? What is an outcome of a wave potential? And in my studies, that said, if you hone your mind, you activate the observer effect. and that is what will congeal in from reality. So that really became the basis of this work. Now, there's that little drawing of the vortex in the middle, and that is truly where I go when I go into theta waves, right? When I go into deep meditation, holding a single focus for a long time, that heart chakra for me just opens up, because generally, my focus is on healing, and the heart just blows wide open in that time. And so that has really become a big part of my work. I think right about part of somewhere early on, about maybe 2002 or 5 or so, I also read the book The Field. That was my first Lynn McTaggart book.
It's good.
Is an amazing collection. Many of the studies that you refer to sometimes with the random event generators, Laura Lee, though she has, all of those are in there. She very, very deeply researched what are scientists doing quietly in the basements of the universities that nobody really talks about.
Kind of
right?
forbidden turf, isn't it?
It is forbidden turf. I mean, a scientific, as Tony could attest, a scientific career is sometimes a very fragile thing. So The Field actually became for me a very influential book. And let me see what else. The movie What the Bleep Do We Know was in there. That was right around that time. And really studying my own ability to use my art and my focus intention. And that is really when some of these journeys became, the intention journey started in earnest. So after, toward the end of this period, I really had come to understand myself in deeper ways. And these are some journal sketches now. I had really understood that what I see matters. I mean, I'm going to say this one more time. What I see matters. And I realized that it doesn't stay in my head, but that it goes out to whatever lineage I am attached to without any breaks, right? It was a very powerful understanding for me to really see in two worlds, and for this to also work both ways. I also by this time had a number of what I call interdimensional experiences. And I was very aware of that I don't just exist in this physical form, but that I absolutely exist simultaneously on other levels in other states of existence. And I will communicate up and down that through my vibrational understanding. And so this is all part of how I come to intention work. At this point, I had taken in a lot, and I had a need to sort of put my own personal org chart together just to make sense of it. And I'm by no means saying this is how it is. This is just how it worked for me. And the great late anthropologist Margaret Mead said it is really important for us to have a model of existence that is good for us to think with. And this became my model that I could think with. If I'm down here in the physical world, I realize that I'm totally and always connected to other realms and other dimensions. I refer back to this myself all the time, and this really becomes a way of communicating with other beings that I might, anybody that I may intend for. Now, this is not necessarily in outer space. To me, zero is in the middle of my heart. It is in the middle of the earth, right? It can be anywhere. And about this time, so I think we're at about 2007, Lynn McTaggart wrote her next book, The Intention Experiment. And at this point, I started really working with intentions much, much more specifically, instead of more loosely as I had before. And I want to read something that is from Seth Speaks that I read back then, and it really touched me deeply. This is a quote: "As you sit in your present moment of time, You are positioned at the center of a cosmic web of probabilities that is affected by your slightest mental and emotional act. Your thoughts and emotions go forth from you, and it goes deeper from there. When I was reading that back then, it made me so, I got such a feeling of responsibility of what happens in my head, right? That I really started paying attention to the thoughts that I actually couldn't support, because I realized that my own state was affecting all kinds of people around me. Now, I had left my home in Germany, right? And my mother lives there and I live here, and we're very connected. We're like a single particle that was parted, right? I mean, that's a mother and a child, the original one particle.
A deep
And
bond.
we've always noticed that when I was doing bad, she was kind of not feeling right. And then I said, okay, let me make sure I adjust my attitude or my health, right? And we did this sort of in tandem all along in our many years apart. So I really started paying attention to the fact that things don't stay in my head, but really actually emanate out into the greater cosmos from what I do. And this little sketch made me understand. This was a journal sketch where I realized I am standing in the stream of consciousness all the time. It occurred to me at this point that spirit is not a dial-up connection. We're all online all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I also started then at this point really experimenting with, for instance, the first one that I had was I needed a computer, and there was, I didn't have the money to buy a new computer at that time. And I just laid it out and said, I need a computer. And in a very peculiar way, this computer just sort of flowed into my, into my life through this stream of consciousness. And I realized also then that I could get out of the way, that I didn't have to exactly know how this was going to happen, but that I would kind of take the lead off or the hand off the rudder, as it were, and just let the world around me bring things to me. I experienced that with many, many things throughout my years of working with this. And right about this time in 2007, I was also reading Lynn McTaggart's next book had come out, which was The Intention Experiment. And The Intention Experiments, yeah. And there was like shortly after I read that, in the book, there was a segment where she talked about healing intentions that Tibetan monks would do for Johns Hopkins patients. And that was very resonant with me, because I am ultimately about healing and about, restoring. And it wasn't long after I read that my brother, I have a brother who lives over in Thailand, had a stroke. He had a pretty massive stroke. And for professional reasons, I couldn't leave right then. And my mother couldn't leave to be with him for health reasons. And other parts of my family couldn't go. So I was very distraught about this, because I really wanted to be there to support him. And I finally realized that I had been studying all this stuff, and I've been reading all this stuff, and I said, let me test it. And I ended up spending probably an hour every day sitting in deep meditation, visualizing things that I thought needed to happen in his body from the report that came out of there. And he made a very complete recovery. Now, I have no idea, I said, I have no idea whether what I did helped, but I also don't know that it didn't. And I just kept going. Now, he had a great medical team. I would never say, don't go to, medical help. I really, in a way, think that our intentions are really the wind in that sail, and that help all of the systems that are working, much the way our nutrition helps our health. And, it is one more element of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we
So
can't just stand by and do nothing
no,
either. That's the other
kind
end
of.
of
I
it.
mean, I could
We have
have,
to do what we can do. Yeah.
yeah, I could have just said, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be what it is, and I'm helpless here." And it gave me a sense of that I can help,
Mhm.
whether I did or not. I mean, my brother, if I tell him this, he would probably say, "Oh well, our sister has now gone off the deep end." Um, yeah, we're all in different places with this, but it was the beginning of the work that I do healing work with people when they're requested, or when they come in my field and I say, would you like for me to put my focus in, right? With animals, I like working with animals a lot. But anyway, so this was this was how I developed into intention work. And next came, let's see, next came a very interesting period where I actually went to the Amazon with my dear, sweet friend and soul sister, Vicky Peck, who was at the time a journey leader to the Amazon, the Ecuadorian Amazon. And I just want to share, I have a whole talk on just that story alone, because Tony, if you want to see coincidences, Tony, I think you actually were at this talk one time. There were just coincidence upon coincidence, right? I mean, the morphogenic field in the rainforest is amazing. But there was just one little story I want to share because it really taught me this surrendering something in a beautiful way. And Vicky had spent some time in the Amazon earlier and knew a medicine man in the village where she stayed, and he had fallen off the roof and broke his back. So it's very difficult to navigate the Amazon with a regular wheelchair. And there was a special wheelchair that they wanted to purchase for him. And there was a small group that was raising some funds for it. So I said to Vicky, well, let's raise some funds and we'll just take the money down when we go. And we did. And we got to the edge of the rainforest, and we were with our Ecuadorian journey leader, and we said, well, do you know where this man is? And he said, I really don't know. He moves around once in a while. I have no idea. But we said, well, would you take the money and give it to anybody that knows him so that it can get to him, right? This is the rainforest, right? It's not just like drive up the street and get it to him. So we left the money with him, and a group of us flew into the upper Pistasa river in 4 planes. The weather was a little dicey that day, and there's always the no go decision. And we sent plane 1 and 2. Vicky and I were on plane 3, and it was the weather was getting worse and worse, and it was pretty hairy at this point. And we had a very, very mind-blowing landing in our destination point. The 4th plane, which had our journey leader on it, couldn't fly anymore. They took off, and the cover started pushing down so hard that they were almost at the top of the canopy. And the pilot just said, you know what, we can't make it there. I just have to land at the nearest strip. He said, there's a strip, we're going to touch down there. And they made a safe landing, and they got off the plane, and the man in the wheelchair was right there. And so at this point, our journey leader just laughed. He got off the plane. He said, I guess we're just here to bring you this money. And they drank some chicha, and 2 hours later, the weather cleared, and they caught up with our group and flew over to where we were. To me, that was such a beautiful example of that dance, right? That dance of saying, I don't know how, you know how.
But the cosmic
Right?
clock does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, and this was in 2013. So these are just a couple of examples. I had many, many more in my experience, in my early experience, but I really want to get to our group work. And I will share now about the rainmakers. At this point, I thought, well, okay, maybe we can make little larger groups. This was actually before I think at this point, Lynn McTaggart was also doing larger groups, but I wasn't tied into her work so much at this point. We just did it ourselves here. And this map shows New Mexico in early summer of 2013. The brown shaded areas in the center are exceptional drought. And we had exactly the same experience like you did, Laura Lee, where our animals, right, the grasses weren't growing for the rabbits, the coyotes didn't have rabbits to eat. Our plants in our gardens, right, we're all gardeners, were hanging and suffering. And it was really an act of compassion and deep desire to say, let us water our earth here, that we formed a loose group and said our focus was to receive 12 inches of rain in Placitas by the end of 2013. 12 inches is the more or less average for our area. And we didn't do this in totally synchronized time. We said, everyone use your own way of talking, whatever your way and your modality is to talk to your divinity. Just do it. If you can do it at the same time, fine. If not, do it whenever. The idea of manipulating weather is certainly not new. I mean, the people in the rainforest do it, right? I had a grazing with a tradition from Mexico. Shamanistic people do it, right? And also, there was a beautiful movie that I saw at that time called Contact, which was about an Aboriginal group that called the rain in order to safeguard themselves from being found. Yeah. So I was taking all these ideas and said, let's try it. This was my visualization. I just had come out of the Amazon where they had clouds to die for, right? So I was looking at clouds and our rain gauge. That was my work. Everybody else, I don't know how they saw it, but we did. And then here's what happened.
Okay.
On the 13th of September.
You didn't mean all at once, did you? Yeah.
Well, I guess we weren't specific enough. And this is really what this brings up, be specific. Now, here is an interesting point. The central map, the green and yellow red map on the left is the radar picture from September 13th. It is so rare that we see this in New Mexico. The map on the right, actually, the more purple shades are the degrees, how unusual this really was. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing to comment is that in Placitas, we did not flood. We actually, I think the official rainfall for the year was 13.2 inches. And at our personal weather station here in our garden, it ended up being exactly 12 inches.
Just what you were praying for.
Yeah. What we were asking for right here, right now. I will say that the drought was so severe that year. We know of many other groups that were also sitting for rain, right? So this map was not just us asking for Placitas, but it was our entire tribal brothers and sisters were calling the rain for their fields, right? Right. And this was very compelling to me because how strong of a signal can we make when we are really focusing on the same thing, right? Yeah. So this was, I think, I don't know if anybody from the Rainmakers is here. I mean, I know Tony is, and if anybody wants to weigh in at this point, this was really a remarkable experience that also gave us pause to pause. We had to think for a moment and said, oh my gosh, what if we don't know what we're doing? And in a conversation with my friend Tom the other day, he said, oh, well, I don't touch Mother Nature, right? It doesn't occur to me to affect Mother Nature. And even as he said it, we both cracked up because I dare say that we do, whether we do it with a conscious intention or an unconscious one, right?
And we have a long, long history of that as well, culturally. Yeah.
Indeed. So I don't know if anybody wants to say anything, but
okay, Tony.
Tony was a part of Rainmakers, yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was in in Garching, Germany at that time. And I asked Bianca, can I participate? And she said, sure. But our time zones were a little different, of course. We're 8 hours different. But I did. And of course, I'd left dryness and I came back to find, we wrote of our experiences to each other
Yeah.
and the visions we had. And I remember I had a vision of rain when I paused for that, and big rain. And yeah, it was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is interesting to invoke all the senses, to feel the rain and to taste the rain and smell the rain and just feel wet in the visionary process, isn't it?
I'm going to add
Yeah,
Tom,
I mean,
Tom
to
also
me,
to
the
this.
visual process is so
Yeah.
powerful. I mean, as a visual person, I was thinking about Christina from a couple of times ago when you guys had the sound, and she said, my whole life, everything has been about sound. So in my life, certainly it has been
Hear the
about
rain.
vision. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, Laura Lee, let me jump to the next, just one more quick thing. After this experience, I had sort of my own litmus test period of 4 years when there were a lot of health issues in my family and my own included. And about this time, this was like 2019, I connected with my friend Tom, who lives out in Phoenix, and we had lunch. And so, Paul, while you bring Tom up, I don't know if he's up already.
He's already up.
I will just share that we went to lunch and Tom said, oh, I found this book about the power of eight. Now, I had not read her Power of Eight book, but we shared what we know about her work, and I respectively. And he said he was going to take her master class. Lynn McTaggart is now doing master classes that run a full year. And Tom and myself and Tom's wife and these other lovely people who all agreed to have their picture up met for 2 years. We actually extended our group for a full 2 years. And we intended 2 people each week in for about 200 intentions. And that brought us right through the pandemic. So it was a very interesting time to do this together. And at this point, I'll go ahead and stop sharing here, and we'll meet Tom.
And there's Tom. Hello.
And there's Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Bianca. Thank you, Paul and Laura Lee, for this event. It's wonderful. I know when Dr. Goodman, I was in a bookstore in Santa Fe, collected Bookworks, I think it was, on San Francisco Street, and found Dr. Goodman's book of all the poses. And I never went to the Institute, but definitely bought the book and sort of followed it a bit.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. I was just wondering, Tom, we know each other from work. We're both in the field of architecture and design, and we've known each other for about 30 years and sort of come together every so often and exchange our respective consciousness explorations. And so do you want to say a little bit about how you came to this work? I mean, you've always been on that side in this wedge of the pie, right?
Okay, yeah.
Tony, I'm going to take you.
The first book I read was Paramahansa Yogananda's book.
Yeah.
And subsequently worked with Oliver Black. He was a disciple of Paramahansa. And of course, Roy Eugene Davis out of Georgia. I being in California in the 60s, of course, it was all
experimentation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a perfect time to be there. And so I realized at a fairly young age that there was lots more than what I saw in front of me. And fortunately, particularly my dad, but there wasn't any negation of that. There was actually encouragement. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And moved to New Mexico, actually because I wanted to find a university that worked with indigenous materials in architecture. And at that time, architecture schools around the country were very theoretical. Yale had a great program, but it was all theory. The only hands-on one I found was at University of New Mexico, where they actually had courses in Adobe and passive solar. I had gone to the Frank Lloyd Wright School for a couple of years, and prior to going to New Mexico, and Mrs. Wright and I had a good relationship until we didn't.
Okay. Was her
She
piano. Yeah.
she was a student of Gurdjieff, and she taught at the school. She taught his movements, and so we learned those. How our bodies moved through space, the effect it had on adjacent bodies, kind of like the planets. And at that time, I didn't have any real background in architecture or really in art. But Mrs. Wright and I spoke for a couple hours about Gurdjieff. And that was my interview to go to the school. And she said, okay, I'll see you in the spring.
Wow, interesting.
You also must know Vicki Peck, because she's part of the group, and we met Vicki. And Vicki, who you mentioned about your story with the Amazon, was the one that told us when she was doing her field work with a tribe in the Amazon, she said, telepathy is just a fact of life. And she told the story of how she would go out with one of the hunters to study, what does the tribe do? And she noticed that he would suddenly just listen within and then head off to some other place, no other cue that she could see, and then just join where one hunter had brought down an animal. And all the other hunters just knew. There's no cell phone service in the jungle. They weren't calling out. They weren't whistling. What other signal was there, she said, but they just knew. And so I guess my question is, you mentioned a lot of synchronicities happening in the Amazon in your adventures there. Do you think, and I would posit this, that when you grow up in a culture that just accepts this, when the conduits in our neurology are tuned to this through practice, through that muscle being well used, when there's no forbidden turf there in this, it's just accepted, doesn't that field grow to support that? Aren't we more in tune with the cosmos and its energies and all it has to gift us and the life force? Couldn't we create that society? Yes, can we stop a war? Yes, can we change a climate? Yes, can we live in harmony? Yes, can we be in right relation? That is what cultures throughout time, other than our own, have tried to do, to amp this up, to utilize this, to be in touch with this, to taste it, smell it, be one with it.
And to be honest,
those indigenous societies are showing us how. What?
At the same time, being honest, some of those cultures fell apart as well once they lost that particular connection. So
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Well, we could also suggest that the Maya, who also spent so much time, and Christine Van Poelwell has talked about this, a lot of it's about rainmaking, their symbology, their
Right.
ritual, and yet they fell apart. Their climate didn't, but they were also in such a structure, a hierarchy. They were grabbing people's hearts out of their chest.
Right.
I mean, it went a little too far there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that, I mean, really, can we, maybe they veered off. They were ritualized heavy, but was it the heart? I mean, did they utilize the heart in the right way? I would say no. No.
Not if they went that far.
And they
yeah.
say that the people, the common people, just said, "You're not working anymore," left, right? And those Maya, those culture, those people are still there without their hierarchy and their elite. Let's be cautious of what the elite's doing and why and what their agendas are and their power thirst, right? We can see that at play today. So I would just say that good for you following the indigenous ways in architecture, and we're going to talk about this with Tyler coming up. his girlfriend is there looking at solar and batteries in the next generation, and he's saying 10% of the world's power now is solar. And I'm like, yeah, but think about it. When Jimmy Carter put panels on the White House, if we had all the building that has taken place, if it had been working with nature as you're trying to do, Tom, and not against her, if we had been the world's leader in solar power, we would have a 50-year history and advancements.
You're bringing up a good
You know,
topic.
when are we going to
Architecture-
learn to work with what nature is gifting us?
Architecture and intent together. These two. This is an amazing
These are two-
Yeah.
opportunity to.
What are
to
we
pick your
saying with
brains,
the
but
buildings that we're building?
what are
What
we
are we
doing? Yeah.
saying
'Cause
with
even-
everything that we do?
Even
Our
beyond,
culture is making a statement. What are we saying?
Right. Even if we transcend a little bit of the mystical aspect of intent that we've been discussing,
Make it practical.
coming back to the reality of just simply having respect for the planet around us would change everything. If we
If
all
we could
joined in
see
that,
the energies, if we could see the beam, if we could really read our own intentions.
right.
What are
Anyway,
we?
Yeah, and also if we get, on one page with some intentions, and I think maybe with that we'll kind of return to speaking about the group intentions that we
Yeah.
did with the Power of 8 groups. We found ourselves together in this beautiful circle. And I think if it's all right, we'd like to share some of the things we
Exercises?
learned.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just
insights,
what we did.
observations. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tom, as we were working with the group, we were then a solid Power of 8 group. Do you have any intentions that we did? Maybe you want to speak a little bit just about how we did our intentions, and maybe one or another that stood out for you. I mean, we did 200 of them. Obviously, we won't share many, but just maybe a couple of them. Is
Yeah.
there?
And that's why I think these experiments are so important, because
Yeah.
we're using it. We have
Yeah.
to look at how and why and how to focus it and really understand its power and take responsibility, as you were mentioning earlier, Bianca. So tell us about your Power of 8. And like, you guys get together, and then what? What do you decide what to do? How do you align?
It's really based on need.
Need? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if there's a particular need, then we focus on that individual request. Otherwise, we usually had 1 or 2 intentions each week. And 10 minutes was set aside for each intention. And there is a protocol, but it's very similar to any, or the ones I've experienced. They all seem to have the same flavor. You state the intention, you sort of get out of the way and don't ask, oh, is that going to happen?
Right. Don't put doubt into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you let it go.
How do you state the intention? Is there, were you using a formula? Were you feeling it? Were you?
Bianca, do you have that written down?
No, but I'll just share it. I mean, basically, we would, when we got together, we would craft each person. Let's say I'm the one that is up for my intention. I would craft a statement very clearly and concisely what I wanted to see. So it could be like, in healing, for instance, right? I'd say, I am my intention or our intention. We always started by saying our intention because it became a joint intention.
As a group.
Our intention is for Betty's liver values to improve next week, right? Maybe somebody was dealing with a cancer or something, right? Or our intention is for the fruit blossoms not to freeze with this next Arctic blast, right? So that might be the intention statement. And then we put it in that blue circle. We connect with each other visually, right? We imagine each other as holding hands, even though we were in different parts of the world. And we would then put whatever we were intending for that statement into the center. And then we would all go and we would take usually a little breath work and go into an inward space, Sometimes some of our people use tapping to get us into that space. And we would be in this trance space. I think most people use music also. I always do. And then we would just for 10 minutes hold that statement, craft that very specific crafted statement. And afterwards, we would share the experiences that we had, what we were seeing, what was coming up. And I think we experience much the same thing that you guys experience when you do your posture holding, where all of a sudden, in my language, that's called coherence patterns. We started making coherence patterns where we might be seeing the same colors, maybe the same imagery, right? We had one time where one person we were intending for, and almost everybody saw daisies. And she said, well, daisies are my favorite flower. Right?
Yep.
But so
Yeah.
I think you and I talked about, we had one very specific intention that was very meaningful for us for several reasons, and maybe just share that story.
Yeah, let's hear that story.
Yeah, the one I'm thinking of is a good friend of my wife, her grandson. He was very small, maybe a year and a half or three, maybe 3, 4 years old, and developed cancer. And so we started intending for him. And the most notable intention, we did several intentions for him, so it was a process. It didn't just all of a sudden blossom into a healing immediately. We asked that his red blood cell count came up because his white blood cells were
Neat.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the next visit he went to the doctor, which was a few days later, the doctor asked the parents, what did Braden do? His blood work is totally changed.
Huh.
And we don't know, obviously, if we were the cause, but we may have been.
And the placebo effect also has to kick in here, just knowing that there's a group that cares enough to put in this kind of effort and prayer work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, similar to the Rainmakers, there were lots of other people in other groups doing conscious intention work with that little guy.
And similar work.
Yeah.
Similar results. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. That's.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to share a story about it was a friend of mine that she's a good friend of ours also in the field of architecture here. And she was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma that had metastasized to a number of her organs. And I connected with her one day and I said, would you like for us to hold you in our circle? And she said, yes, absolutely. She has also been on a consciousness journey herself and done enormous work. But it was a scary time for her. And she agreed to be in the circle. And I think we just supported her journey at that point and say that the next scans will show up, that the tumors will shrink. And so we were working, she actually crafted the statement for us so that we would then see what she wanted in the next leg of her journey, right? And I think that's kind of an important thing when we work with very large things like climate or like healing somebody who is in a way difficult medical situation, that we work incrementally, because we can't possibly sometimes accept ourselves that it can go, right? So acceptance is a really huge part of this. And in my long journey, we did tiny incremental acceptance stages. We say, oh, okay, we can accept
to
that.
build confidence and
to build confidence and saying, oh yes, okay, I this can work. She she said she felt the energy because she would sit in her house and we were focusing on her and she was receiving. And she noted, and this was important, is that she actually said it was difficult to receive that much love, right? That
Oh,
was a big
interesting.
part of making this work, right?
Yeah.
So to me, those are some of the very interesting concepts that come up when we do group work. Um, One very important point to me is the point of prime directive, right? That we do not intend for somebody who doesn't agree,
Right.
excuse me, or want to be intended for.
Need permissions. Yep.
Yeah. And so that the prime directive, we went right into the pandemic, right? I mean, we were going all the way through, and then came some very big intentions that said, how do we address the suffering of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
We were all watching truckloads of bodies leaving northern, the town in northern Italy, and we said, what do we intend for here, right? In other modalities, we will always say, if it is for the highest good of
Thank
all
you. Yeah.
involved,
Right.
right? And
So you
that
kind of
became
cooperate with the prime directive. You just say if
exactly.
everyone's in agreement, it's already stated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
can we cannot possibly know what the highest good is because we do it from a totally different level. So for instance, if we have the drought, the extreme drought that we had, we had to make a judgment that it was for the highest good of our animals and our gardens to get water, right?
Sprinkle evenly
What
over
does
the
the
year.
yeah,
Yeah.
what is that like on a much higher level? So that was a very
Yeah.
important thing I think we experienced when we were going through these intentions. Now, I will say that I was a little bit of a chronicler of what we were doing, but not in a very scientific way. But I would say out of the 200 intentions that we did, maybe 80% happened. And sometimes they
Wow.
didn't happen. I have worked on things myself for 20 years that I continue to work on that have not happened. And my husband, in his wisdom, said, maybe it's not done serving you, right?
Oh,
So those are very compelling points about this to
Yeah.
me.
yeah.
And I think, Tom, we
Or maybe
talked a
it's
little
not
bit
the
about,
cosmic clock's time to
Yeah.
dial that up, right?
right,
But
right,
we're
yeah.
co-creating in a universe with many intentions and energies and sources and agents, right?
I
So
mean,
we're
I have to
dancing
look
with
at,
a whole lot and in a
we are. I
tapestry.
mean, it's back
Yeah.
to that dance, right? In my
Yeah.
little picture. And really then there comes a question where I sometimes there's an interesting concept that is will versus willfulness. That is a very interesting thing to look at, right? Because I'm saying sometimes in my human earth walk here, I may have an intention and it is actually overridden by my greater intention that I had coming in here, right? I mean, that predisposes some concepts that not everybody agrees with, but
What do you say?
if I look at, so maybe I have a much higher purpose yet for myself, right? So those were
Yeah.
very interesting concepts that we experienced. I think you asked me at one point, Laura Lee, what about if it doesn't work, right? What happens? And I don't know, Tom, do you remember any, like, did we
Well,
have any failures?
we did an intention for the hammer toe to be healed, and uh, it still is there to this day.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't asking about when it doesn't work, but what really, I mean, because we really cannot claim direct cause and effect, right?
Right.
We don't know, but I do know that we can self-sabotage ourselves. We can set up an experiment that we don't want to happen, and then see the negative results as saying, see, I was right. Now I can remain safe in my safe little worldview. I see a lot of that at play here, and so it is very enervating to confront those unknowns. It is enervating to confront one's own hidden powers of the universe, right? It is interesting to readjust our worldview. And that for me, what is it all about? How do we read the anomalies? How do we read the seeming miracles? How do we read, what do we make of this? And then that's interesting. I just want to say something else.
Go ahead.
And go ahead.
No, you finish.
I want to bring up the ritual. We, of course, are very enamored of ritual and the ritual power. Just a quick story. So someone gave me a book called The Paper Doctor, and it was a series of patterns. And under each pattern, there was a condition that this is supposed to alleviate. And I said, okay, I'm willing to try things. And you hold your hand over it, or you put a glass of water over the pattern and it's supposed to infuse it. I'm into patterns. I like patterns. I like art. I like symbols. So I thought, okay, I'll experiment with this. I can't say what effect it had, but I started to think about, why should that work? Why would anybody believe that that could work? And my understanding, and even our own ritual, is that we can set up rituals that signal to some deeper part of us.
That opens us
and
up
that
to the reality.
releases it, that makes a shift. And so even if we believe, okay, here's a pattern and I'm going to imbibe this pattern energetically in some way in that pattern, we are harnessing our own placebo effect, which I think is so undervalued and underexplored, that we are giving a signal to the healing mechanisms of our body. Yes, let's heal. And this is just one-to-one. This isn't even about coherence patterns and the power of group, but it really is about the power of ritual. We understand our own ritual, and this is another added element that I want to bring up, as we have a long-standing protocol, a long-standing agreement with the other realms.
Right.
And that is to ways in which we can knock on the door and open up the flow of this energy, life force, grace, whatever it is, to amplify the effect here, whatever is flowing. I truly believe it's an energetic universe, and that we can open doorways for flow, and that we are the hollow bones for it to connect through and work through. And the conduit, the circuitry, the nervous system of the cosmos, we're all a piece of that. And that one thing that we honor our ancient ancestors is they have developed this coherence pattern, this morphogenetic field. They have put in a lot of time and energy and energetic conduits in there. And to tap with the ancient traditions, we are harnessing volumes more in this, right? We are, and it's vital to continue this like a DNA code energetically.
There's a
I
balance.
just think that it's important to honor the ancestors. I think that this stuff can flow through time, backwards and forwards, that we're really connecting with this. I think it's so important to create our rituals in the moment, but also understand and respect the rituals that have gone and stood the test of time. And so when you look at a society like Vicky Peck was engaging in that way and saying, oh yeah, their telepathy is flowing, their synchronicities are flowing, they are living. I mean, that's probably why the land is so important to them.
Right.
It's why temples build. You can walk into a temple and you feel the layers of the energy.
I think our group work really.
We need to start creating our. Go ahead.
Well, when we're talking about the telepathic work, they're really, when we're working in groups and we're making an energetic connection to each other, that connection starts happening.
Flowing.
Now, when I work with a specific person, right, I will get information that there's an energetic exchange, and that telepathic communication does really start happening when we start tying in. I would actually even argue that this is happening now in ways, right? We're an evolution of all of these old rituals, and we're simply the evolutionary step of it. Now, much of it is now going away because we're doing this all day, right? Which is kind of the outward expression of the metaverse within that has always existed. But I think these are the new rituals, these sitting together in circles, right? I mean, well, what you guys do in your sessions every week, and I don't know,
And all
Tom,
over the world, these are
really
going
all over the
on.
world. I mean, we're just
Right.
looking
Yeah.
sort of at the Western. I have friends in, I don't know if somebody's here from Kuwait even, and from, my brother is in Asia, right? And Fred, by God, has all of the work that is happening in India. I am really seeing this evolutionary, the circle is growing and we're expanding outward on every front.
As
And
the
important.
priests and those temples have been
Absolutely.
broken down, right? Look at what's happened in Tibet.
Yeah.
Look at what's happened there. Yeah, we need to step in, and yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
I'd
the
like to
question,
go ahead.
go ahead, Paul.
Well, I'm just following up on some of the bouncing back and forth of conversation, and that is that to me it's very important as we look at this almost like the razor's edge of our relationship to life around us, because
Yeah.
there's that little bit of a tweak there, because sometimes there's the new age kind of perception that somehow I create my own reality and it's disconnected from reality. And so we want to come back to that fact that we are creating when we work in conjunction, not separate from. And
all a
so
dance.
it's really a powerful and important part of my life that I see. Working on the land
Community.
of the Cuyamonga Institute and working with this ancestral village land that has going back thousands of years of people living on this land. You don't come in like a bulldozer and think that you're bringing some kind of knowledge and spirit and intuition and guidance. We get phone calls from people. It has happened to me a few times where people say, I've been guided by spirit that I need to come to your land and heal it. Well, let me tell you, the Pueblo people have their own ways of healing. They don't necessarily need us to come in and heal for them. And also the voice of the spirits and of the land is so strong. And I bring this up as an example because as we have this conversation about intention, it's important to me that there's always this balance between relationship. And when Laura brings up the concept of the ancestral peoples, it's not that the ancestral peoples felt that they came in with some great power and controlled the weather. They tuned into the fact that they were a part of that. They had a relationship, an honoring relationship back and forth.
Reciprocal.
It wasn't the human brain and ego sometimes steps and thinks somehow
Our
within
Western
control-
arrogance.
The Western arrogance.
Yeah.
But even and when we had that great privilege of meeting with a shamaness from the Uchi tribe in Siberia, and she came to the United States for the first time. And the very first thing she asked to do is to go be on the land and ask permission to even be here. She didn't come to the United States as I'm the shaman of Siberia and I'm going to come teach you people. And so I get really uncomfortable sometimes when the conversation gets a little too new age, where people think that I'm in control of the universe and I'm creating.
Nobody's saying that here.
No, I didn't say it, but I'm putting it out there as a flag post, a guidance, that I really like the fact that we're following this pathway of finding that natural balance, like I mentioned, the razor's edge as we go forward. And there's significant science to suggest that what we're talking about today is very, very real. It's not some belief system or some fanciful thinking. That there's science to the fact that at the most subtlest levels of ourselves, when we create intention, when we create from that source of ourselves, that we have the greatest amount of power and influence and impact. So I just wanted to return back to that concept as well, that as this conversation continues, I wanted to get that on record, that we're not, because someone could watch this interview and miscontribute or misunderstand that we're not suggesting that everybody go home and just say, now you can control everything in your environment around you. I mean, Dr. Goodman was a serious scientist, and she did not buy into some of the world's new age ideas. She felt that we need to follow the path of what we've learned from the ancestors. And being an anthropologist, she was so respectful of all aspects of that type of knowledge and not to step on the footsteps of that. So I thought it was important that I also throw that into the conversation today.
And I hope the science can
Yes.
further that understanding.
Yeah.
I hope that we can truly further it and then harness it.
Right.
right? And
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for bringing that up, Paul, because as I have worked with this, I I am at a point where I'm really receding from it to say, okay, how do we do that, right? I mean, my personal practice is to go out pre-dawn every morning and greet the day and my own totem and say, what if this is right today? If right, or
Right.
then
Exactly.
then bring it to me. But I know that I can ask. And when I have that drawing of me in that dance, right? That is acknowledging every day that I am humbly here on the earth, and dance with this, but that it is also asking. I mean, there are times when I would say, well, like Spirit is asking me, what do you want? I can't wait to give you. But what is it you want? Right? And I have to be clear on that. And I am humbled by this work. I will tell you that when I sit with a healing, with an animal or with something, I go to that level where I really call that spiritual work and say, can we pour nothing but love into this? If it is correct to do so, right? If it is in
yeah.
the highest good. And
And
every
that's the
time,
impulse to with which to create your own rituals, your own intent,
yes,
right? That's the
yeah,
impulse to co-work with the universe,
Right.
it seems
right,
to me. And that's what our ancients were doing. And we can't go backwards. We want to
no,
take that wisdom and move
we
it
can't.
forwards and apply it to our day, our lives, our challenges,
We greet the sun each
right?
day at the Institute based on the
But
first
that's the
original
eternal.
rituals of Dr. Goodman, and part of that process is inviting permission from the spirit of the land to continue. One more day, one more time that we step upon you, one more opportunity for us to work in
But we have a
cooperation.
larger sphere as well,
I
right?
know,
We
but
have,
that's an example
yeah,
of how that process works.
yeah. Do you want to bring Mary in as
Yes, I
well?
would actually
Yeah.
like to.
Hi,
Mary
Mary.
is also somebody I've known for many years from our industry, and we also come together every so often. And she's had her own journey, and so I'd like to introduce Mary.
Then
And
we'll open it
Mary,
up
if you want
afterwards.
to just
Okay.
say a couple of words about, how we connect once in a while, and what your experience with intention work is. I think you have some good things to offer.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thank you for letting me join you. This has been fascinating. And Bianca, as long as I've known you, it's always nice to learn more. So that was a beautiful
Yeah.
presentation.
Absolutely.
And so thank you. So really the intent, I'm going to get right to the intention work that I've been doing, which is a little bit different, but it is based on the same work. And how it evolved for me, as opposed to having a group of 8 that we just did intentions for different people, all of my intention work has been specifically around a certain person and their healing. And they've been part of the group and they've written their own intention. And we've all come together and held that intention on a weekly basis for that person's healing in a very specific way. And so from us with the protocol, some of the things that we preface all the work with are the certain ground rules, right? That the processes and the formula that we have learned from the work. And so the first thing that we do is when we come together, we all do kind of a quick deep breath work of getting into our hearts and out of our heads.
Oh,
And
good
so
place to be. Yeah.
right, we all come together and we make sure that we're all taking everything that's in our lives and setting it aside for these few minutes, and that we're coming in and recalibrating and recentering and getting into brain heart coherence in just a few minutes to get relaxed. The other ground rules basically is that we leave fear and judgment out of the group and the group session, and that what our focus on is when we look at the intention, we look at it and we experience it with all of our senses for those 10 minutes as if it were already happened. So when we have an intention for somebody's healing and for them to be free of dis-ease and to heal into wholeness through love now, that our focus is for those 10 minutes is sensing from all of our being that person being in that space now. So what you focus on, you get more of. So if you focus on what you don't want, you get more of what you don't want. So,
Yeah.
so we want to make
Unconscious,
sure,
yeah.
yeah. So we want to make sure that what we're
Where
focusing on,
attention goes, energy flows. Yeah, as they
right.
say. Yeah.
And so the whole process is that we come together and we hold this, and we also acknowledge that because we're all connected, and because we're all one, right, from the beginning, earth, our animals, all life, and each other, that as we heal one, we heal all.
Yeah.
And what I found is when the person that is at the center of the healing intention, this helps them release and accept and receive at a different level than if they feel like all the attention's on them, for them, and only them, that they understand it's flowing through them and they're a conduit for healing and wholeness for all of us at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And so I kind of have taken this healing work. I don't know why it's evolved this way for me, but it really is around and I guess there's a lot of dis-ease and things happening in the world today. And so, but what it's taught me and what it's helped me do is remember that that how you want to feel is the end result, right? And because we all want to feel a certain way, at peace, connected, in love, whole, vibrant.
You're bringing up something that I think is really important, is that call it the field, the universe, the higher whatever, has a certain protocol of its own, right? Has an onion layering effect. And I remember talking with an energetic healing once, and she said, the first thing I do is really try to understand the as you said, the increments, the steps of the process. Peel this layer off, then this layer off, then this layer off, then this layer, that it has to be its own individualized journey to understand. You referenced that too, Tom. And maybe with a toe that got bent by whatever forces of the skeleton or the pressures, or maybe you need to correct the posture first and alleviate the pressures on it. Maybe there's a system before the toe can emerge as it needs to emerge, I was sort of thinking. And that we need to understand the right method. But if we just appeal, I know you guys were drilling down to specifics, but to appeal for the end result, let the flow happen the way the flow needs to happen, that only the mysteries know. We don't intellectualize, I guess.
Right.
So I'm sort of sensing you getting at that point.
And then the other part that we do is we let go of the outcome.
Right.
It's not
the divine.
It's
we can't impose our will on anyone.
That's
I
right.
need you to heal because you'll make me feel better. But they have their own journey.
Yes.
That's the prime directive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. They have their own lessons to learn and their own timeline for that. And
yes.
Yeah.
And that's what goes back to
Tom?
Mary, you brought up a good point, Mary, that I was reminded of. Often we have obviously an individual in the center of the circle to be healed.
Yeah.
But what happens when you heal them is everyone else receives healing as well.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a huge experience of all of us that we had. And I noticed that very early on when I was doing healing work. There might have been, I might have had a shoulder issue or a knee issue or whatever, that really we're in a different frequency at that point. And if we're the host through that funnels this loving energy, that it was a byproduct of healing our own bodies as we were healing others.
Yeah, that energy flows and everything in its path is brightened and loved. And we have a similar method where we put the name of somebody in a circle, right? We often invite people to do that and then let go. And people have said, well, I tried to focus the healing, but I got a headache. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not to use your intellect during a trance state. There's a different muscle that comes forward. It's about receiving and being that hollow bone and letting it move its own whatever it needs. I mean, it knows more about this process than our little intellects, our little self does. So just open up, let the energy flow. And it's interesting. We're also cautioned, of course, to say we can claim well-being. I feel better. I feel energized. I feel something happened, but never claim healing. You get yourselves in a lot of legal, medical
right, sure.
claims saying anything like that. But you could say well-being. So that's a much nicer word for us, a much safer word.
Well, I think,
And
yeah.
who knows?
I mean,
Who knows
with
what's happening?
with
Yeah.
all the knowledge of the vagus nerve that we have now, that we're understanding that it is really that sense of well-being. And, healing, the healings can be temporary, and, we've all had experiences probably like that, where something goes away and comes back. Through my lens, that often has to do with your energetic state, right? I mean, my well-being is certainly a reflection of, my own bandwidth where I'm in on any given day, and that could be influenced by the outside. Now, hopefully, and as Mary, we had a conversation the other day, the only thing we can ever truly do is handle ourselves and take care of our own internal garden, right? And that is really, to me, where the power of intention really is right now. Is how can we tend to our own garden, because we're all one drop of the ocean of all of us. And if we tend to our own garden inside and have that wellness within us first,
we'll be clear vessels to radiate it out.
Yes, then we will be part of a greater whole. Yeah.
Well said.
And letting go to me, I think this is, a huge
that's why I like what Tom said. Set it up, let it go, get out of the way.
Let it go. Yeah. We definitely, I mean, there were times when we in a group intended, and I think one of our group members one time was really disappointed because she just thought this would work. And it was an immediate response that we realized it wasn't working. It had to do with the fruit blossom freeze, which we in New Mexico call the annual fruit blossom freeze, because it happens almost every year. And we said, well, our blossoms our trees were in full blossoms, and we had an Arctic blast coming, and we said, we intended for saying, be gentle with us and please don't freeze our fruit, right? And so one of our members just said, yes, of course we're going to save those fruit, and of course we didn't. It wiped out the entire crop, and there was a lot of disappointment because we didn't let go, right? So this part, I mean, letting go is one of the greatest inner senses that we can cultivate in my experience.
Bianca, another thing that I've learned is that sometimes it's very difficult to set up our intentions, and words matter too, right?
Yep.
And you don't say what you don't want, you say what you want.
Right.
So when you don't want them to focusing on what you don't want, and you get more of what you want. So you need to, and it's very difficult sometimes to stop and say, how do I say what we want and what we intend and what we want to feel and see and experience, is as opposed to the opposite. And it's a dance, and it's a lot of work because we're set up that way. Our brains kind of work that way.
Well said.
Yeah, we had actually quite a few wordsmithings on some intentions, because some people said, I don't know how, I can't get to the nut of it, right? I can't get to the heart of what it is I really want. So sometimes we would work in groups to wordsmith this into place. And it is important. I mean, you're saying, instead of saying I don't want to have fear, say I will have courage, right? I mean, that's the very basis of that. Yeah.
Architect it. Your architects here. Architect the verbiage.
Design it. Yeah.
I want to leave some time for others to join in the conversation. We got some comments in the chat room, and people can raise their hands as well. And thank you so much, Tom. Great addition to the conversation. Yeah, and thank also Mary as well. Thank you, Mary. I'm going to take you here.
I think they're going to stay on to comment.
Oh, well, we'll bring them back on if they, but I have to have room for other people to join in. Okay. Yeah. First of all, I was going to, Elizabeth gave a great quote. She said, man plans and the gods laugh.
Exactly.
Man plans and the
Exactly.
gods laugh. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then
Exactly.
Carolyn said, "This presentation's making me feel so much at home. I feel my whole life has been spirit whispered to me, and when I followed has led my life-changing experiences. We all have had connections through the web and the void, and intention and non-intention waves affect us all. I've been in healing sessions, groups for a friend with cancer, doing the tattooed jaguar posture. It's one of our posture in our
Oh,
group.
great.
All of her visions were given to her, and she, being a mystic herself, discerned how to proceed with her treatment. She's now cancer free 6 years later.
Wow.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so let's have some hands go up. Cam's got his hand up. Hi, Cam. See if we get you here. Where'd you go? There you are.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I didn't want to, I said something in the chat. I didn't want to bring the thing down right quite a bit because what I'm talking about is a little dark. And I'm just following a disclaimer a little bit. I don't know if you guys ever heard, you talked about architecture and the aspect of what in relation to what you're meaning. Have you heard of thanatourism?
I'm
No,
sorry,
I
who?
have not.
Nope.
Thanatourism is a type of tourism where people go around to different locations across the world and they experience or go to the locations where major events have happened that were like a whole bunch of people died in that one location. Okay. Case in point, tourism to um, 9/11, where the ground zero, the battle of ship Arizona in Hawaii, stuff like that. You can literally feel
Yeah.
you can literally feel the location, all right, when you go there. If anybody tells you can't, they're crazy because you can feel it. I remember when I was 18 years old, I was in the Marine Corps and I got stationed to Okinawa. And I was at Camp Kinser, which is a location just north of Naha. And I had no idea looking out at the beach because I was too young and too stupid to understand how these things work. Looking at all these landing craft that were out there on the beach, all right, near Kinser, they just left out there, and I could feel something just pulling on me terribly, standing on that beach, not knowing that this was the place of a major, massive battle, the worst battle of the entire war. This was where 150,000 Okinawans had been killed, where somewhere close to like nearly 200,000 Japanese had died in this location, whatever else. You can, anybody that tells you can't feel these things are, they're kidding themselves. And I'm kind of stepping out a bit away from the scientist and going to personal experience. As a police officer, and I worked as a cop for 20 years, you can have someone stare at the back of your head and you know it immediately. All right, that someone is staring at the back of your head.
With
People
intent.
feel the intent. People feel these things, all right? So there's no argument to me that there is we talked about cause and effect before. There's no argument to me that these things are real. They are absolutely real. All right, people experience them. I don't know how much control we have over these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I don't know how much intent has anything to play in it whatsoever, as far as this exchange of energy or whatever you want to call it, some kind of this exchange of whatever going on between point A to point B with people, how they feel these kinds of things. I can't say one way or another, all right? But I will say that being an avid hunter myself, being involved, but I've been hunting probably since I was a kid. I've kind of noticed that one of the things that happens when you are a hunter is that the respect you have later on as you get older, and you immediately start your views on life change dramatically, because when you experience the aspect of hunting and you experience the aspect of, especially people who have been also in the military, seeing death at that level, you start having an emotional response to life. All right. You really, really do. There's a direct connection to life in many ways. And because of that connection you have, I think other people start recognizing it in you. this is my personal opinion. You have other people will recognize that aspect in you. I've seen
Yeah.
it between military members
Yeah.
where you have absolutely nothing you're wearing whatsoever to denote yourself being in the military or to have been in combat, and other people start recognizing you from across a room and
Yeah.
immediately knowing it when they see you. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my mind, there is definitely something going on there that we have yet to tap into or understand specifically.
Energetically.
And just an idea to throw it out there. And I wish there would have been. I wish there was some kind of way to study this. All right, at least in that aspect. All right. And as an anthropologist myself, I would love to figure out a way to do that, but I have no unearthly idea how to
To
get
set the
into
parameters.
that
Yeah.
direction. You know what I mean? But
What are
anyway,
we
so throw a
registering?
comment
What are we
at you, and
picking
hopefully
up?
you might be able to respond to some of that.
Yeah. Cam,
Thank
thanks.
you, Cam.
Good
Yeah,
insights.
interesting.
Tim, I like your way of saying, even for you, the field exists. I mean, we call it the field where all things are connected. Yeah, we are exploring. I mean, we are exploring right now, right? I mean, with all of this work, it's a huge exploration. And yeah, it'd be great to know some more about that. And I love when we put science together with it. That's, my personal preference to figure that out. But I also want to I think Bobby Miendorf responded earlier to what Mary said about this deeper, more sensitive, more feminine way of working with intention.
Right.
My own experience is really Lynn McTaggart's it's almost like a yang way of saying, well, we're commanding the universe. I am in a space where I'm much more fluid with that. And I really want to, I really want to walk that razor's edge because I am on that razor's edge all the time, right?
Yes.
Where these things meet. And say, can we really dance with both those approaches? And certainly calling for a more gentle, softer, and reconnected to very old things, right?
Yeah.
In our rituals. Can we do it that way?
It feels.
I've come to the conclusion that our creator has it all under control, and we're just here on the stage with the curriculum going through the paces.
Well,
I don't know.
that is a very, very, very big contemplation, really.
Yeah.
That is the very big contemplation that we're having, right? Is there a master plan and we are just the actors in a script that is greater, or are we part of writing the script?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the relationship.
Yeah. And prompted. What are we prompted to write?
Tony does want to join in the conversation. So Tony, I'm going to put you on.
Yeah.
And, more people can raise their hands and participate, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I had, well, of course, this is fascinating to me, and I'm also on the edge, being a scientist, but it's I cannot avoid these observations that I'm having.
Yeah.
And a little story I'd like to tell, and perhaps Paul, you put up the slide.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead and start, and I'll bring it up.
Okay, well, back in 2017, there was the total eclipse of the sun, and I managed to talk quite a few of my friends into going up to the Oregon coast to see it, where my brother and sister-in-law have a house, and they cleared a field, and we had a bunch of us present. You can see us all sitting there. But what happened on the morning of the eclipse? I woke up in my tent. It was raining.
You're in Oregon.
I walked outside. It was misting. I'm on the Oregon coast. Well, is this unusual on the coast? Maybe not. But then I listened to the rate. I looked up the weather forecast. Rain all day, and so I met with the people, and we had a bunch of us there. And I said, the weather forecast about 30 miles inland up Highway 20 is much better. So if you want to go there, you could drive and do that. And Bianca said, I think we can fix this. I'm not quoting her exactly. Perhaps she would like to say
Not
it.
exactly.
But she said, I'm going to do intentions. And a number of us elected to stay. And then, so you can see what it looked like at 8:09 in the morning. At 10:08 in the morning, you can see blue sky. And we're all sitting out looking at the partial phases of the sun. And at 10:16, we had totality in perfectly clear sky.
Yeah.
It was quite remarkable. I will say that
Good job,
several of the
Bianca.
callers that left dash back when we texted, "Hey, Bianca is clearing the clouds." They came dashing back. So anyway, this was a really interesting experience, and it's great fun to know Bianca. Uh, this is a fascinating program. Thank you all. Great presentation.
One of our members had made a beautiful oval of driftwood pieces. And when it looked like we were not going to see the eclipse, and we drove a long way, right? We drove clear from here to the
3-day
coast.
journey.
And we were a large group, and we wanted to see this. There was also, I was working with another group prior to that, and we thought, what an opportunity. When you see an eclipse, it is truly spectacular. It shifts you inside, right? I mean, Tony, we've talked about that a lot. Seeing a total eclipse is a remarkable experience in our time. And there's another group on another level that I was working with that said, let us illuminate. I mean, how rare is it that it arcs from the East Coast to the West Coast of this entire country? And the ultimate intention was to let us be illuminated. If it is for our highest good, let us be illuminated without a cloud from east to west. So when the clouds came, that is the intention. I stepped into that circle with that our friend made. And I went into meditation and danced and said, if we need to be this clear, if we want to have this illumination, give it to us, if it's right. And that is how the clouds move. It's not that I moved them. I simply engaged a higher spirit.
I will say, after living
I like
on
that
the
stance.
Pacific Northwest coast for some time, blue sky is a rare,
rarity.
a very rare thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tony.
I like that stance of working with
What is
you.
that?
Just like you would in
Illusion.
any collaborative project, you don't come in and dictate. You don't come in and command. If you really want the cooperation of who you're engaging with, in this case, the cosmos, you collaborate, right? You find the medium ground, you engage, you exchange, which I think is beautiful story. But I still want to know who's been making clouds disappear.
Reed, did
And
you
I'd
still
like
want Reed? You had a question?
Oh yeah, want to hear from Reed.
Hi, Reed.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just raised my hand that we've also had some experience with that.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing, as Tony describes it, Tony, you want to jump back, is to see the eclipse happen is to truly understand how connected we are to the cosmos, how it's just the sun shining that obscures that view from here to eternity through the stars, and that they're always there shining. Yeah.
This is a moment when we see the sun as it really is in connection with the earth. And other than that, we have the illusion that it's this nice little well-behaved round ball that goes across the sky and warms us every day. But at this moment, we can see that how enveloping it is, that it reaches out to us, that it's active, there's motion, there's dynamics there. It's actually extremely emotional as well as being extremely beautiful.
And awe-inspiring
And
that
how many-
our cosmos and works the way it does.
And the sun's not going to burn up for quite a few years yet, right? So
There are 6 billion, they say.
okay, so it's quite a few lifetimes from now. Okay.
Yeah, I can see Laura's counting.
What's going to happen?
Cam,
at the
Cam
end of
wants
the
to jump
road.
back on again. Okay. Hi, Cam. Yeah. Oh, you got the book Illusions. Yeah, with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Mike's out on them. So yeah.
I see Sister Margaret. She
I'm
was
there,
the
I'm back.
recipient of our last group healing.
Yeah, it's
Maybe she
true.
has a comment. That would be nice.
I was going to say that this is the only book I've ever ran into that actually describes the thing you're talking about. All right, it was a fictional book. I don't guess you're familiar with it or not. Illusions.
Yeah.
Richard
Yeah.
Bach. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's all I want to bring up is that he does a really good job
All
of
right.
it.
Well, thank you both. Sister Margaret, do you want to share? Laura kind of called you out. I don't know if you. Let me see if she was here a second ago. I didn't look to see. She might have had to go.
There she is.
Oh, there she is.
I hear her.
Yeah, I have really appreciated everything that Bianca has shared. I like the stress also on focusing on what we want
Mm,
because I think in the past we've focused on what we don't want.
right.
And so
Yeah.
we're giving energy to the wrong thing.
Exactly like Mary was saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then letting go of the outcome, I think, is maybe the most difficult for many of us. And it reminds me of stories that I've heard of people who've gone to places like Fatima and prayed for healing.
Mm-hmm.
And when they come back and their friends say, but you didn't get healed. And often the response is, but my attitude toward the difficulty has changed completely.
Mm,
And so again, open to the outcome is so, I think, so important. And I love the image of I'm standing in the stream all the time.
All
yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, Margaret. I'll see you again on the next
Yeah. Posture.
session. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say something that has happened just recently, that young baby girls have come into my realm that are having a very difficult time entering this plane. They're coming in under extreme difficult circumstances health-wise, right? There are some very serious things that are happening. And I'm connected with these people on one level or another. And they maybe know that I do this work and say, would you hold her? Would you do what you do? Which is really just putting my universal love garden hose on them, right? And I have really had to ponder and wrestle with when I ask a person that has cancer when they're in their 50s, 60s, whatever, we can say, what is your desire? I can't ask an infant that had a stroke in vitro, right? I can't ask that question. I can ask when I go to that whole other level. Remember my org chart? I go back to before she came and find her intention, because I have to say, is your intention to teach your realm that you are coming into, right? So this is really compelling to me that just recently 3 baby girls have shown up in my field that I've been privileged to water. And what I'm learning from these spirits and what they're telling me as they're entering their earth walk is remarkable, right? So very, very interesting. I mean, this work just gets deeper and deeper, like anything else that we do. If we start digging in, we're peeling many, many layers. So
This
to
reminds me
that-
of a radio interview, and we should post this one with Eden. I won't say her last name.
Oh.
And she talked about her personal journey healing from breast cancer, where she had the x-rays and she wore a particular necklace so that she knew when the doc showed her the x-ray it was hers and not a mix-up, for example. And she said that she did everything she could, followed all the
Protocols.
alternative methods. And basically she said that she felt this lump disappear when she appealed to the universe and she said, I release the outcome. If I die, so be it. But I want to learn the lesson involved here.
Right.
Dear
Whatever.
spirits, God,
Good.
creator. I want to learn, what did I come to do and can I fulfill that mission? And she felt it actually disappear at that point where she was not attached to the outcome. She said, the healing that I want is my soul, my life journey, my path, and my body doesn't matter in this journey ultimately. It's about my essence. And then she goes back to the doctor and sure enough, it's gone. She said she felt that moment. So I think I agree with you, Sister Margaret. That is a pivotal moment to release yourself to the gears of the cosmos and the ultimate source and its will.
And actually
Does that sound religious? I don't mean to, but
No.
I've come to terms with that.
Coming back to Mary said, I didn't mention in our healing sessions for my sister, who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, treatable but not curable, but has no detectable cancer in her body today. Again, we don't take the credit for the outcome, but we're grateful for it and feel a deep connection to those in the circle.
You know, and I also think that we have a responsibility, at least, to help, right?
Yeah.
You don't just watch
Well, that
something or
is,
somebody suffer and not
yeah,
step in what way you
yeah.
can.
I mean, I tell you, the three of us, Tom and Mary and I, had a brief touch together before we came here, and we dug into that, and we said, at a certain point, if we're all co-creating, why intend at all, right? If everybody's doing their own co-creation, and that becomes very complex to think about.
Do you want to put Mary
I
and Tom back on?
personally,
Because Mary has to go. But go ahead.
oh, Mary,
She's at 12 o'clock and it's noon.
Mary is signing
Past
off.
12.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
past 12. Let's see,
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to let
Yeah.
Mary her last
Thank you,
words.
thank you, Mary. Thank you for coming
have-
in.
Bye-bye, Mary.
Couple of
being
last
nice
words.
with me.
You and Tom, I want to conclude and thank you for being here today.
Thank you both.
To join us. So,
A beautiful opportunity. Thank you. It's fabulous to hear everything and learn more about your institute. I'm looking forward to learning even more.
Oh, well, thank you, Mary.
Thank you,
That'd
Mary.
be great.
I want to join, if we
Thanks,
can bring
Mary.
about world peace or have an
Yeah.
influence, I want to join those daily
And thank you, Tom.
sessions with the
Yeah.
power of huge
Thank you.
numbers. Tom, your final thoughts on this?
I just had a thought that sometimes the healing works and the person passes away. Because the healing worked. And somebody had mentioned earlier about the difference between curing and healing, and the healing can work and they die.
They're done.
That's
On to the
yeah.
next adventure. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Again,
Thank
not
you,
being
Tom.
attached to the outcome.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Appreciate your words of
Bianca,
wisdom.
I really, truly want to thank you. Your clarity of purpose and your intention, the way that you communicate. It's a wonderful opportunity to know you. And
Thank you.
maybe putting you on the spot, because we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but maybe just for a moment, taking those of us here still standing in the circle, that we put a focus on the current situation. Because what's the downside?
Exactly.
Any of you that have doubts about the power of intention, there's no downside. So let's join in and let's all do it together. But maybe just take us through a quick process.
Lead us
what's
with that
happening.
power and intent for world peace
Can we
right
do that?
now. And
Yes,
I did want to have you
yes.
finish your sentence because I didn't mean to interrupt, but Paul's got a higher mission here to ask.
I think it's
Yeah, if anybody who is in the circle is still left in the circle that would like to join it, we'll just take a few breaths and a deep inward journey for the moment. And close your eyes if you're comfortable closing your eyes, and feel the circle that you're in. These are people that are in our frequency right now, and hold from your heart the intention for just a moment to say, can we have peace? Can the current situation in the Ukraine resolve peacefully without greater bloodshed? And can it be for the greatest good, which we surrender? We do not know what that is, but in our hearts, it really is peace. We have got to come to a place where we are in peace, because we have greater work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Get that coherency pattern.
Yeah.
Get going out there.
Yeah, beautiful.
So
I would like to leave us with one couple of final images and thoughts.
Sure.
And also, are there any other comments? Because I didn't.
not yet.
Okay. I want to make sure.
We'll go ahead and.
Okay.
When I was sitting preparing for this talk, I asked myself, how is this? How does this really work in my dialogue with spirit? And this is the picture I was given, that we're sailing on an ocean, the ocean of all there is.
Right.
And that our intention is the beacon in the distance. And then I thought, great. And then, we hold the rudder and then there's the wind, which intuitively I thought, oh, the spirit is the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to really ponder this for a long time. And I just want to put this up as a ponderance for everybody else. Who is holding the rudder? And who is the wind in the sails? And I contemplated this for 3 days and got a very interesting answer. And so I'm not going to answer it for anybody else. I just want I mean, if it's obvious that our intention is the beacon in the distance, ponder for yourself in your own heart, who holds the rudder and who is the wind in the sails. And then finally, we can dream a new dream, and we can choose what that dream is. Yeah. And so I just would like to invite us all to dream a new gentle world. With all the challenges that are coming, we are navigating turbulent waters and will be. This work is so important, like our friend Bobby Miedendorf, who is taking people into beautiful inner discovery journeys, right? And all the wonderful work that people are doing. Let us dream a beautiful new dream. I know that we can.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And that's what it's all about, steering the ship collectively.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if we don't learn the skill, if we don't understand we have this power, then we will sail over the edge and be no more.
I mean, I was talking to Mary, and, you know, I am not in a circle of 8 group. I am loosely attached to the, you know, the larger groups that are happening. But ultimately, I want to know what is the power of one of me over me, right? That is where it starts, right?
You know, a really strong example of this was our friend who we interviewed many times in the past from New Zealand, John Glennie, who overturned on his catamaran in the middle of the ocean and was lost at sea for 119 days upside down on top of the catamaran. And that whole experience of giving in and connecting to nature in a new, positive, and strong way, the guidance that he received and how it flowed through him and how his life changed and shifted. You got go of all that control of the ego. You just start flowing with all that's flowing around you and learn how to live and how to breathe. And that to this day is his message. And he dances on this earth with such joy and happiness. He's such a blissful person.
Everything's gravy for him.
Everything's gravy for him at this point. Exactly.
But also he said he had to see it in biblical terms, that he spent 40 days without water.
Right.
But he had food. Then the food ran out. Then he had 40 days with water but no food. And then 40 days with basically nothing. He said he asked for nature to deliver them. He was on the boat with several other people. And they crash landed on the Great Barrier Reef of Australia when the current's supposed to should have, if it was a normal year, taken them to the edge of South America. But and they couldn't believe it when they
could not believe the current shifted
but the current shifted that year and that year alone, and they did actual surveys to find, because they had to prove, you know, so
because people thought, well, you guys are lying, you must be drug runners or something. There's no way you could have lived.
Right, but they had the boat with barnacles to prove they were at sea.
You guys are
for that
dead.
many
No,
days.
we're not. We're here.
But you know, but the winds conspired to deliver them.
We should get John back.
Yeah, that would be a fun story. That would be a fun story to have.
Yeah.
The winds conspired to deliver them.
Okay, we run out of time. Bianca, blessings and love to you.
What a wonderful, so we want to thank Tom, and we want to thank Mary and Tony and Vicky and you, Bianca, and everyone who has come together today. And thank you for your meditation on world peace. If we do have the power to do that, this is something obviously to engage in climate, to really to appeal to the spirits to ride our way.
Right.
Because that's what we've been doing as humankind since time immemorial. And we certainly need that guidance today.
Okay, everybody, say thank you to Bianca.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca.
So very much.
Know your powers and use them well.